Good evening and welcome to Community Forum. I'm your host, Byron Campbell, and my co-host, of course, Chris Ali. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Byron. Good to be back and good to be here with you. And good evening to our viewers. Pleasure to be on Community Forum again.
Right. Let me say that this evening we had a special guest this evening, Chris, one of our ministers, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, they were unable to show up. Nevertheless, you and I will be program this evening. We want to focus on the 1 year on the government of Grenada. You know, there's a lot to talk about there. The Prime Minister was on Beyond the Headlines last evening, and he had a lot to say. So we're going to go through that, of course. But before we head there, Chris, a couple of things that's been happening this week. Well, the past few days, last week, the issue of universal education. The CPA results are in. The traditional release of the results by schools and positions and the celebrations you had in school with who come first, second, third. It was a big thing for parents and teachers and the school and the community, you know. The government has, however, moved to a new position, a new policy where in the universal education, where everyone doing the exams or the tests, so to speak, have the opportunity to go on to secondary school. There's no longer the need for positioning, you know. So there was a bit of disappointment there from the community and from parents and from people, but specifically coming from the TUC, the GUT, the Grenada Teachers Union. In fact, the president was on saying, and I quote him, he felt that there was no insufficient or no consultation on the matter, that he saw that as being disrespectful. There should have been consultation. But this is the reality. What's your take on it, Chris?
Well, I mean, Byron, I understand positioning because traditionally that is how it has been done. Yeah. But internationally, when you look at these type of exams, positions are not announced. What is announced is children's first choice to the secondary school that they want to go to and whether they've gotten their first choice. And I believe the positioning thing probably is more for the parents and the school. The school would use it as a sort of opportunity to advertise themselves and to say that we, especially private schools, that we better than the rest and, you know, keep sending your children here.
Yes.
So you could understand from their point of view that impacts. Yeah. And of course the parents. The parents use it as a method to say, you know, my child have done well, I'm feeling proud, and I lift my nose another half inch. And of course, you know, some of them get excitement out of that, and you know, it helps. It helps the parents, I think, to be more so than the children. Yeah. And the children, to me, the position is just a fading thing. You come first. By the time you reach secondary school, you forget to come first. But I mean, I could understand that the GUT may have a little concern. I don't know how much consultation was done in the background. I'm quite certain the government would have made these moves based on, you know, ideas, or not ideas, but advice they would have gotten on what is the international practice and whether this is more positive than negative for the children in particular, more so than the parents and the schools and so on. So, I mean, from where I sit, I mean, I don't have children at that level anymore, but the point is, I can understand some parents. But if you get your first choice, I think that is more important. Yeah. If you get your first choice to go to the school that you want to go to.
The student can still indicate their choice in terms of the schools.
Well, based on that
is still a possibility. Still available, But I also want to congratulate the GUT on 110 years as an organization. You know, that's a long time. And to have stayed and to work with teachers, the institution. Congratulations, it's really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I extend the same. I mean, but unionism in Grenada is strong and active. And an organization like GUT making 110 years says a lot about the movement, the labor movement, and the ability to be consistent and to have the administrative things in place to ensure that the organization continues, succession planning, all of that. Excuse me. So you have to give them kudos for ensuring that the organization continue and have grown. Probably from what it was in the beginning
Are we, as a society, are we recognizing, are we in tune with the importance of teachers and their contribution to development and society? But also the trend there, as we've seen, you can see it on a May Day when they gather together, that the overwhelming majority are female, you know, young women in particular. From an educational point of view, and the balance and the gender issue and the mentoring and so on for a young male, is that a factor? Is that how could this be affecting education and development?
I
males
went
in particular.
In secondary school. I went to BBC, and that was
same here.
Right,
same here.
and
right,
most of the brothers were male.
Yeah.
It was overwhelmingly male to female
Yes.
in terms of Presentation College. Here in the other schools, of course, if you go to the girls' school, the teachers are overwhelmingly female more than male. You will have one or two male in between. So I suspect it's based on the type of school and what happens. Those where we have mixed boys and girls, they seem to have a mix of the teachers as well. So I don't know if it's reflective of the school and the type in terms of gender and what happens, but you see that. But at the end of the day, I hear parents still complaining that, you know, a lot of the teachers take teaching now as just a job, and they compare to when they went to school and the dedication of the teachers that they had to go beyond, you know, for children and to take care. And apparently you're not seeing that now with the younger teachers, and that seems to be a problem for parents, because parents come, our generation and parents from our ilk and probably the next generation ahead of us, never. When you saw a teacher, there was reverence and how you deal and the authority, how you spoke to a teacher.
The teacher Blanche and so on, those kind of names.
And we come up in that kind of environment. And I suppose we're comparing it now to what is happening with the younger teachers, and some of them are just taking it as a job, obviously. Because
but what about the professionalizing of it? You know, we had in the past a dedicated teachers' college.
It's still there?
Still there.
On the TAMCC?
On the TAMCC, you have this specific wing that deals with teacher training, 2-3 years certificate.
That's right.
Excellent,
and
excellent.
Teachers how to plan work, how to deliver their work, all the new trends that's happening, and how, you know, you work that into the syllabus and into the teaching methodology, because that has changed over the years significantly. So it is still there as far as I'm aware.
Another important development I heard on the wake dealing with sports. In fact, the GFA announced a new technical director or a coordinator on the direction of the new president. That is Mr. Glean. I mean, you know, you look at the number of football, not just matches, but tournaments that have been organized, the gold tournament around the country. One get the sense that the GFA is on a push. You know, this is really good, I think, for sports and football.
I know they're getting a lot of money to promote women football, and that is something that they have been working on and developing as well. On the men's side, you know, there's still a lot of issues, and those who are pro or against a particular association at the time will tell you they're doing well and they're not doing well, depending on the position they take. But my position in football, in terms of where we go as a country, will require significant money, and we don't have that kind of money to dedicate to our players. When you look at countries like the US, who was never in football, and they come with this nonsense with soccer and what soccer is, but money is pumped. Players are able to leave a job and be paid to play football and train. When you look at Jamaica, when Jamaica reached World Cup, when you look at how much money was pumped to the Jamaican team by the government, it's not small amount of money. Same thing with Trinidad. And the countries that have made it that far and into the international arena, so to speak, are countries that have significant investment in the football team, the national football team.
What's FIFA's policy on financing? I don't understand that it's based on your population. There's some
I don't know.
ratio.
I'm not sure. I mean, I know FIFA will give a lot of money for the developmental aspect of women's football, and they have been getting that. They do give a lot of money for administrative and programs, you know, youth programs and so on. But I mean, at the end of the day, the national football team has to be taken by the country and the government and in association with the association to keep the players, you know, developing along a certain line, exposing them to teams. It's a lot involved, and for you to get a quality to that international level is a lot of investment required.
Chris, well, of course, our main topic this evening is, of course, dealing with the 1 year on, that is the NDC, the new administration, so to speak. And as I alluded earlier on, the PM was on last evening.
Quite a few programs.
Quite a few programs, actually.
Making the rounds.
Making the rounds. I saw him on a radio program also. In fact, let me say also that he would be here at MTV, Rise and Shine, in the 7:30 program tomorrow. Not here, but most likely on Zoom, but certainly appearing on MTV morning show. So we look forward to this. But I listened to the program. It was almost 2 hours, actually. It was fairly long, but certainly quite informative. But the critical question here, Chris, is that the first day of an administration, the question is, what are our expectations too high? I mean, what do we expect 1 year in an administration that is young? Keeping in mind that the administration was so green that one of the policy things they did was to appoint transitional leads, these are persons that supposedly would be familiar with policy matter, ministry matter, government matters, governance matter, and therefore they were seen as advisors, more or less, to ensure that the new ministers coming in, new ministries coming in, would be adequately directed, so that was one of the first things, and that took, I think, about 3 months in this policy. But 1 year in an administration, this is to say it was a young and green administration. This is not an excuse to say that what was the community expectations. But from one of the things that certainly was a highlight there was the question of project implementation, and he did speak about that to some length. And in this regard, the government, as a policy position, established a new ministry, the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Technology or Transformation? Transformation, And this is to say, clearly, implementation. Let me just focus on implementation here. And I think this was done in recognition, I would say, of the need, because you get results, a lot of results are evaluated to the extent of your implementation rate or your implementation, how well you've done there, But what is your take on this generally, though, Chris?
Well, let me put it this way, Byron. First of all, let me start by saying I think this government have an excellent PR aspect of it, Photographers travel with ministers, with the Prime Minister. They're excellent on social media and promoting what they do.
So they're doing a good job.
They're doing a good job in promoting what they do, or not doing issues with that and so on. But outside of that, I think after 1 year of a new administration being in power, we probably set too much expectations for them, and there's just so much you could achieve in a 1 year in a 1 year cycle. But I would say, from where I sit, I think this government has done exceedingly well for a few reasons. One is they came in green, appointing transitional leads to help them in the various ministries with the new ministers. Remember, those ministers that are appointed are all brand new, zero public experience for yet probably 1 or 2. But they have done that because they recognized that was a problem and a weakness, or a potential problem and weakness, so they augmented themselves. So kudos to them. I think the learning curve for our Prime Minister has been steep. He's a bright young man, so I expect that to happen, and he has done well. But what I think more so, when you look at generally, I think the government has kept the economy going through the construction sector. And the last government had a lot of projects in phase. In process. They didn't shut them down. They kept them going. So the economy continues to bubble at a certain rate. Construction leads it, education services to a certain extent, and tourism. So they have done well in managing that aspect of the economy and keeping, and those of us in the private sector have little concern about the economic activity that's happening. Of course, that said, and what they're doing and how they're doing it on other programs like the Orange Economy, they have put that on the map. They have invested a lot of time and set up a section of the economy to deal with the Orange Economy.
And that's cultural and creative.
That's right. Cultural and creative arts. But what you're seeing also in the first year, from my perspective, is that a lot of the promises that were made politically, they have taken time to do that.
And let's outline them.
So they had, of course, the orange economy is one. Then they had the issue of paying fortnightly public servants, which they implemented. They continued with CBI in a significant way. And those are all things that they spoke about. They paid pensioners. The money, of course, the pension issue is not resolved because we have a lot more work to do. And it doesn't seem as though we're making much traction, but we could talk about that later. But they have done those things, in my view, from a political standpoint, and from that will resonate well with their supporters and to some of us in the society as well. So I think, all in all, I would compliment them for the first year. I mean, those of us who expected more, I think is a little bit unreasonable because they're brand new, they had to adjust to new governance, new public service rules, all of that. And that is not a simple thing to do. So I think if you were to be fair, I will give them a good pass on the first year. The challenge now comes hereafter.
Well, one of the policy decision that I thought was excellent had to do with the question of how they approach statutory bodies, the boards. One of the pronouncement was that, look, if you were sent to a board, certainly at the level of chairman and senior director, that you will have to undertake certain qualification, understanding directorship. And I think that's important because what we've seen a lot in the past, a lot of people went on boards with no qualifications.
I mean, let's say it as it is, politically,
not understanding their roles and responsibilities. And another dimension of that, which I thought was very interesting, was also the fact that it was opened up to nationals overseas. Given the talent we have in the diaspora, in particular, a lot of our young, smart, bright Grenadians, they now have the opportunity to participate on boards and to contribute to the development of the country using technology, which is available. I think that has to be recognized as a very, very, very positive,
transformative
transformative. Certainly, let's use the word here in this instance. But staying with commodity boards, the MNIB, because the Prime Minister spoke about it last night by pointing out that yes, it may not have been, persons may not have seen the not closure, but the reduction, that policy to reduce the MNIB's operation as a win. But he mentioned that right now MNIB is able to meet its commitment to farmers. That is to be able to pay. It couldn't do that before. And also indicating that this is the first phase, that the restructuring, what would evolve out of this prior action is not yet evident.
And it is not true some of the things that are coming out on MNIB. You knew where I sat before.
Yes, Why were you before? You were chairman before. But hold on. But that's interesting. I've also worked as chairman of an IB in the past also. So we're both familiar there.
When I heard some of the things pronounced on MNIB, it is, I wouldn't go as far as to say false, but it's not correct.
Okay.
Because MNIB met its commitments to its farmers. You may argue that the payments may have been slow. And the issues that MNIB had when this new government came in were correct. They had issues in meeting their obligations, whether it is suppliers for sugar and what, banks and so forth. But that would have been inherited from the last government not meeting their commitments, what they agreed to do for MNIB to take it out of its problems. So when they announced that they were closing down MNIB or closing down aspects, that is nothing new. When I was there, we had sections where we closed certain facilities, and St. Andrews sold the building. There were a number of things that we were doing because there were unproductive assets that we needed to get to productive. I think the decision to close it was not properly looked at. MNIB serves an important aspect of the community. They're talking about a private-public type arrangement. And there's a lot left to be seen what that will be and how that could work to the benefit of farmers. And MNIB, when you look at the finances, The issue is that the commodity part of MIB made up a significant part of their revenue, and they couldn't operate without it based on the construct that they had.
Yeah.
So if you had to change the construct, close down certain facilities that wasn't profitable, and I think that would have been a better approach to look at. I knew they did a lot of consultations around, and farmers were upset, some were not, and felt something needed to happen. But at the end of the day, I think the decision to move there was a little bit hasty, and probably a little more patience and deeper look into the situation.
It's interesting that both of us can talk about the MNIB because we've both been there. And, I can tell you that on the same NDC administration, previously, of course, there was a clear policy to for entering a partnership. And this partnership arrangement was being worked out with Winfresh, that regional organization. And it went pretty far. All the studies, all the documentation was done. In fact, and there was a major agro-processing dimension to it, that plant at La Sagesse. In fact, Winfresh went ahead and purchased this facility for my estimated over $8 million. So they had gone pretty far. Winfresh, however, went bankrupt or had significant cash flow, and the whole initiative failed. But it was always I supported always a policy that will see MNIB merge with, but maintaining its relationship with the farmers. That is the purchasing.
Absolutely.
But there was also important local distribution and also the export, because Winfred had the expertise in the export market, because they were big in bananas regionally and internationally.
I mean, a simple thing for MNIB was doing export, which we talk about, and we want to encourage agriculture to get to that level. But we have production problems in agriculture.
We do.
If I get an order for 2 containers of dasheen, could we supply it?
No, we can't.
We can't.
Right.
And this is the issue. And then if you could supply, what happens when one of the things that was faced in MNIB, we would ship a container of stuff to Miami in a particular product. And we had nobody on the Miami end representing the company to say, well, sign off, and this is what was left, the quality, and when it reached there, the guy who we sold it to will tell us, 50% rotten, and we had nobody to verify, and we lose money. So there were simple things that needed to be put in place.
But the action ultimately was dramatic. But let's see. I mean, we want it to work. In the interest of the
farmers.
The farmers, absolutely.
During COVID, if there wasn't a MNIB, farmers would have been flat dead on their back.
Provide a credit. But as we talk in MNIB, we can talk about, there was not much mention about the agricultural sector by the Prime Minister, most likely waiting for the Minister himself to announce it. But what I know from, I would say I'm an activist in the sector, that... I'm
as active as you, but coming.
Excuse me. In fact, recently there was a session dealing with the Southsup value chain, at CMOS value chain, but Southsup in particular, great potential in this sector. We need to be very careful about it right now. We have certain pest disease that are affecting the industry. I am personally not satisfied that enough resources are going into it in terms of the management of this pest. And what, in fact, last year was a bad year for a lot of farmers. We had farmers who were decided to go out of the business because of the losses they sustained. That was the scale insect.
Scale insect, that's right.
The scale insects. Because it caused blight, and you see this blight on other fruit trees, whether it's golden apple or sapodilla, guava, mangoes, everything. So I think more resources as far as the management of this pest is important. The other thing we need to look at in ensuring the industry is the fact that we have several exporters. Let's look at it. We are the only country in the world for the time being that can export fresh fruit to the United States. But my information is that Mexico recently applied to the United States for permission to export. I don't know, but this is...
they're making a lot of progress. They have senators
exactly.
Something we have to watch.
Something we have to watch. And this we have also is that we do have our ethnic population that will buy our products directly. But critical for now is, I think, is that we maintain a healthy fruit. We get the support from the ministry to ensure that the scale insect, the cotton scale insects, is managed, at least regulated. That's important. If we don't, we lose that market.
You in agriculture more than me, and I'm going to take it from a slightly different angle.
Fine.
I think the agriculture part of the transformative agenda of this government has not worked well. For me, the major issues in agriculture is labor. One, pest control, as you were talking about, extension officers,
financing,
services, right, and financing. And you haven't heard anything significantly coming out of the Ministry of Agriculture to address these critical aspects of agriculture. Now, let's go back to SORSOP. SORSOP was also a major part of Marketing Board's role. We actually had a whole policy framework and everything developed. Because one of the issues we've seen with agriculture, there's a private gentleman that is shipping out most of the SORSOP when it's supposed to be under Marketing Board's control. There is no control on the quality of fruit that leaves, because Marketing Board is the only HACCP certified organization. HACCP meaning having the ability to verify and say what it is in terms of quality of fruit and all of the pests and all of that, and look at that. And we have this thing happening willy-nilly without much control. And the question is, when do we look to get back control to protect that very significant thing that we have, that we could send SORSOP unfettered into the U.S. market? That won't last for long. Mexico challenging it.
Mexico's challenging
So I say all of that to say that I think from a policy and strategic point of view of agriculture, the government probably have not done much in the first year. And again, we just have to say first year probably is not enough time. And they need more time to get things in play. But you have a big issue with bees. And what's happening with honey, and we can't export to Trinidad donkey years now. And no government seems to be able to deal with it. And we talk about Caracol.
Chris, we have to take a short break. Viewers, we take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Concerned about your general health and wellness?
Do you need to know your complete blood count, lipid profile, or HbA1c?
Maybe you need to get a renal, thyroid, or liver function test.
Interested in STI screening for HIV, syphilis, herpes, chlamydia, or gonorrhea?
All of these tests, plus hundreds more, are available at Allied Laboratories.
Allied Laboratories welcomes you. You can find us here on Gladstone Road in Grenville, in the building next to Calico, on the second floor, adjacent to Dr. Isaac's office. Or you can find us here on Grand Anse Main Road, adjacent to South Winds, opposite the entrance of Excel Plaza. Contact our Grenville branch at 410-3488 or 419-1588, or send us an email at alliedlabgrenville@gmail.com. You can contact our Grand Anse branch at 403-3488 or 404-3488, or send us an email at alliedlabstgeorge@gmail.com.
Fit for life and Allied Laboratories, we're taking care of Grenada. Rise and shine. Rise and shine.
Welcome back to Community Forum. I'm Byron Campbell here with Chris Diali, co-host. Chris, before the break, we were talking about agriculture. Of course, clearly one of the points articulated almost from the beginning of the term, or from the agricultural point of view, was that they want a shift, a greater focus in the spice industry. I've heard the Minister of Agriculture articulate it several times. 100,000 plants, you know, like spices. We again hear him say they want to put emphasis on the nutmeg subsector, cocoa also additional, but clearly I also heard, you know, for a number of years now, because of the greening disease affecting citrus, Maribaud propagating station no longer produces citrus, and that's for about 3 years, probably 4 years. He indicated that this is something to be addressed, you know. So for the time being, we also noted that Grenada has now granted permission to export mangoes to the United States. Of course, once it's treated, I understand we had one export, one shipment going. So there's a potential there. The other area is, of course, agro-processing. I know there is a committee set up to explore, to look at possibilities there, but we've seen no pronouncement or nothing tangible for the time being, but certainly it's been articulated as a direction to go. The other area, of course, is the marijuana industry, or it's called the cannabis industry as an industry. We know there's a committee that's been working for 8 months, 10 months. We've not heard much from the committee to date in terms of where they are. My information is that they want to look at it in two phases. One, the decriminalization, and then looking at the medicinal, the economic aspect of it. But again, we've not had much feedback on this. So there's some things happening, but from a general point of view, from a food security point of view, I would say we are no better.
Yeah, you see,
we are really
again,
at the
Byron,
same
I come back to
position.
the 1 year thing, and probably
Yeah.
our expectations are too much
Yeah.
because of the numerous problems in agriculture.
Yeah.
But I think there are low-hanging fruits that they could address immediately. Pest control, that insect.
Yeah.
What is happening with citrus? I think that is immediate for us, and it affects soursop, which is a significant thing
That's
for us.
correct, yes.
The thing with the honey, I think there's a low-hanging. Instead of giving
Trinidad, with the Trinidad issue.
we have a CARICOM holiday, better we use that and get some
But I
honey
understand.
into Trinidad.
But I was reading in one of the newspaper last weekend, that 2 weekends ago, that the ambassador to Trinidad, although announced, has not yet taken up his position. That's Mr. Wizard. Well, what is his correct name?
Calypsonian Wizard, yes.
Eldwin McQuilkin, yes.
Eldwin McQuilkin.
He's the appointed, it was announced by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that he will be taking up that position. And clearly, that's one of the first matter to take up in Port of Spain.
Of course.
How do we get our honey
Let's hope we can get him to do it. Many governments have tried and failed. I don't know if he has the magic one, but I think, yes, some of the issues you mentioned in agriculture, the marijuana issue, I think, is a lot bigger than probably it appears.
Yeah.
And what has to be done to make it successful.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work there to be done.
Yeah.
I think the other issues that you mentioned in agriculture on the spice side is a good initiative from the point of view that cloves and cinnamon and these things, we don't produce them in bulk as before. But the issue with these plants is understanding how to harvest and the difficulty in harvesting clove, for example, and what happens and how you prepare it. Again, labor intensive, and people don't want to go in agriculture. Now, the prices that you want, we call it the Isla Spice, and we certainly ain't living up to that. So I could understand where the minister is coming from in that respect. But the fundamental issues in these things is labor and how you deal with the labor issue. How do we continue to plant it and cut spice by the moon and it folds off properly? There's a lot of things there, and I hear that, and they sound good, but in practicality, how do they bring monies to people's pockets so that people invest? Remember when we went to banana, Byron, it was a cash crop for a lot of farmers. Yeah, you sell your banana in a month or 2 weeks, you're getting money in your hand.
Dependable, yes.
That's right, and it was dependable from that sense. Nutmeg takes a little longer, and you have to pick it up, and yes, you don't get paid.
A lot of things are seasonal.
That's right. So You know, a lot of these fundamental things to me in agriculture, changing the mode of how we do things, using greenhouses, being able to production plan better.
Yeah.
You know, they have guys that grow in lettuce now under greenhouse and
And the big deal here also, Chris, is climate change.
That's right.
In all of
That's
this.
right, that's right.
And how you offset this with technology.
Correct,
A lot of
correct.
farmers now, irrigation.
a lot of issues there.
But a lot of issues.
So I want to push the envelope a little now.
Go ahead,
all right?
Chris,
And
yes.
I believe there are certain things that the government have started to do that I don't want to use critique for want of a better word,
Yeah.
but things that we need to pay attention to. And I start off with the fact that the minimum wage negotiations and the committee is looking at that, and we yet to see what is going to come out of that. But that in a sense, based on what comes out, and if there's an increase, the question becomes affordability, and I'll come back to that in a while.
Yes.
Then we have heard the announcement of salary increases for public servants ranging in 9% over 2 years, an average of 4.5%.
That's correct.
It also sets an umbrella for us in the private sector. But when government is giving these level of increases, you expect unions of that are with companies in the private sector ain't coming for nothing less than 4%.
Yeah.
If government could do it, why you can't do it?
That's
of course,
correct.
that is not
It's a
generally...
reasonable presumption.
It's a reasonable, but I mean, it's not the right one. But
Yes, okay.
it sets that kind of environment that
Yeah.
makes the kind of negotiation a little
yeah,
bit difficult. And I think the pension issue is the biggest one. The government would have come into power, met their political promise of paying pensioners, but the real issue, the real difficult issue is how do we go forward with this pension thing. I think the Prime Minister mentioned it, but not much was said.
He did
You know?
actually, Chris, talk about, he talked about, I don't know, pension reform.
Right.
But in talking about pension reform, he talked about, particularly in the context for contract workers, because he saw a disparity there, which is reasonable. You know,
And I suspect this
I
is
think,
the regularization of workers that is being looked at now.
But the bigger issue too, Chris, is of course the government pension is not a contributory pension.
That's right.
You know how sustainable it is. He did mention about that, so need to look at
That's
this,
where the
you know.
reform comes in.
Reform
but what I'm
comes in,
saying is
yeah.
there's a committee in
Yeah.
place a little while now to deal with this.
Okay.
But the labor movement is not part of the committee, interestingly enough.
Okay.
They refuse to partake.
Yeah,
I don't know if that
yeah,
changed
yeah,
in
yeah,
recent
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So there is that uncertainty that puts pressure on the government from a spend point of view. So when you're seeing the spend for salary increases, knowing that the pension issue is not understanding on what is going to happen in minimum wage or not, there is a sense out there that we're committing ourselves to higher expenditures and not necessarily balancing that with higher revenues.
And
You know,
productivity.
And productivity, well,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
And the revenues, and then you have imported inflation and how the government is handling that. The government had gas, generally the gas at the pumps have increased, not
Yeah.
only because of imported price, but they're taking out the come over themselves. And of course, the Grenneck issue, by bringing back certain things on the Grenneck bill that they took out, the last government took out, they brought that back in. So generally, you're hearing people complain about inflation in food prices and what is happening and so on. Yes, there may be increases, and I haven't seen in recent time the Gazette indicating what the inflation on year period. But when you look at all of that, the concern is that do we have a firm understanding of how our revenues are going to meet these projected expenditures and what is
And
being
by
pushed by the
extension, a
government?
balanced budget.
And a balanced budget.
Yeah.
So I think that is a concern. And you know, I've always said when we talk about transformation and the government's buzzword, the biggest impact to inflation for me, and I've said it publicly before, and I've said it to some of the advisors, is the issue on the port. And what happens there? Our port is probably the highest in the region in terms of charges. And a recent study was done by one of the shipping agents, and when they tell you what they pay in St. Lucia, we pay twice that here. So if they're paying $200 in St. Lucia to offload a container, we're paying $400, right? And here we have a group of workers on the port, that small group, and they are demanding wages that we cannot imagine. And when we look at the impact of that on inflation, I think that is one of the things that we have to seriously study and understand how that could influence.
Because this cost is passed on to consumer.
Of course.
Consumer takes
without
this
a
up.
doubt.
But as you talk about the economy, Chris, and this factor, also the Prime Minister also discussed the economy and particularly the CBI program. In fact, he said that the first quarter of the year exceeded budgetary expectations. That the unit was a bit leaderless for a while. They didn't have a director. Now they have someone's been appointed. But one of the points he's made, and you're familiar with the CBI program, that Grenada never marketed its program, that it left marketing to the agents, so to speak. So we have never spoke about ourselves. We've never done it ourselves, and he saw us as an opportunity to do this. For example, he mentioned the E2 USA facility, that which is a feature, which is a benefit that Grenada has as a citizen, that was never really projected. I mean, being familiar with this particular, let me call it a sector, from what you hear, Chris, in terms of use of the transformational fund, yeah? How in your view is this, with the changes there, how in your view has this sector worked?
It has worked well.
Okay.
And the potential for CBI to do well is ever more so there and exists. Of course, we have to manage it well. Take, for example, the marketing. Now, the agents normally do the marketing, not necessarily the CBI unit. What the CBI unit is charged with is ensuring that what is marketed by the agents meets our approval. So there are a lot of things we have to see what the marketing is. For example, we have had agents go there and do things that we certainly weren't happy about at the time when I was there, and we had to correct some of the things. So the marketing side, but what we have not done with the marketing is for the local population.
Okay.
A lot of people believe CBI just only selling passports. But the monies that come in CBI through the Transformation Fund
yes,
for community work, developing roads, developing sectors in education and so on.
In fact, I was not aware until he mentioned last night that the River Road project is financed by the Transformational Fund.
That's the point.
That's amazing, because that is what, several million I don't know.
Yeah,
and that's a huge project.
And that's the point, Byron.
Yeah.
We have not said to our people the importance and how it is done, and hence why we need more people to buy in. Yeah. When I was there, we were talking about seeing how we could diversify CBI and get people to support things like, a hospital, doing things in the medical arena, medical tourism. Are there investments there that we could attract and use CBI arrangements to facilitate it? So the government doesn't have to put out a lot of money to self-finance through CBI and get that there. And so I say that to say that the potential is great for CBI.
Okay.
Has to be managed properly. We're not doing when I was there, we were trying to get the digitization of applications and things to a point where when I left, we were doing about 1,000 files.
Mentioned there's a backlog.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we need to get that up to $2,000-3,000 to be a significant player in the industry.
Excellent.
Yeah, so.
And somebody has Duncan there now also with that knowledge of finance, I think. Well, one of the things he mentioned also is regional trade and regional travel, intra-regional travel. And what he said so far, there's been just chatter, talk, discussions.
I know our Prime Minister is frustrated.
Nothing has happened, and you can see it in his face, actually. But of course, they mentioned the Virgin facility that is now available, Barbados, Grenada, I think St. Vincent is. But one of the things mentioned, which is critical, I think, Chris, for development, and I must give a number of projects under the last administration that focus on that, like the SAP program, in terms of training young persons in skills development. For employment. He talked about that, mentioning that skill training and partnering. He mentioned NULO. And I have personal experience with NULO, Chris, and I'm glad to hear this policy, this announcement that NULO is an amazing organization. And I use this word deliberately. In their delivery, their management, with the facilities that they have, they do miracles.
And the
there.
impact?
And the impact, and I've seen it and I've worked with it.
I worked with some of the graduates, and I could tell you.
And the quality that they produce. And we used to at one time associate NULO with taking in the underperformers.
That's right.
Those
who are not academically inclined.
Not so at all. This has changed. It's a new dimension there. I mean, they're doing courses in technology and programming, in PVC, solar panel installation and maintenance, and looking ahead. I'm so impressed with Sister and her team there. So I'm very pleased. NULO deserve this, an injection of funds, and I'm going to praise them all the time. And I'm saying this because I know I'm familiar with it, having worked with them and see the delivery, the discipline and the organization that exists in NULO. I think government resources going there, well spent. NULO is certainly, I think, a center of excellence.
I think NULO fills a gap in the education system that we most times overlook, and that is young people with skills with their hands and what they can do, whether it's masonry, whether it's carpentry, whether it's small engine thing, whether, as you say, solar panels, whether it's PV systems. I think there's so much there that could be done, and we overlook that. And they fill that gap significantly and good. And I mean, the graduates, I could speak to the graduates, as some have come working with me in my institution, and they're high quality graduates, they know their work, they know what, and they, not only that, the aptitude to work, the work ethic, is taught at a level that you know the young people understand what needs to be done, and we need more of that.
That's a success story, and I certainly I have to mention NULO and Sister and her team and say congratulations. You guys are doing an excellent job. Way to go. But the PM also spoke about his, because one of the questions posed to him had to do with his new ministry or his ministry, the fact that he moved, and this happened during the year. It's the first time, by the way, I've seen a Minister of Finance for such a short period of time. But whatever the reasons, he's now the minister responsible for infrastructure. But in his comment, what he says is that the ministry needs to be, to use his word, reimagined. There's issues of organization and management and accountability. He mentioned, for example, this ministry has responsibility for maintenance in all our roads. They have no equipment. Everything has to be contracted out. But that was a policy several years ago that took on where the government got rid of the Ministry of Works, Queen's Park, and left maintenance and infrastructure development for the private sector, you know.
And we know the reason why that was done. Ministers themselves used to abuse it.
Yeah.
You understand, the Ministry of Works.
But when I look, Chris, I mean, I've seen maintenance on the road where they use, you know, they cut bush to make a broom like to apply the bitumen to the road. We still have that taking place in some areas, you know.
Still.
But it's good to hear him say, look, what we have is a kid. If we're going to maintain our infrastructure, if we're going to bring it to the level that we need, we have, 50, 60,000 vehicles in the roads? I don't know. Numbers are high. Infrastructure has to be, I think what he says made sense in terms of how you deploy technology.
Let me put it to you this way. I think a lot of the thing with the roads, to be honest, was the last government had issues with bitumen supply, had issues with the plant. Since we got a Chinese plant here to deal with the airport, you could see a more consistent supply of bitumen to fix the roads. So that is one feather in the cap. But infrastructure, you know, previous governments, and I've given a political joke here now, previous governments would have talked about NNP was all about roads and concrete roads. This government is doing quite a bit of concrete roads as well. And infrastructure, when you look in the south, the Great South, according to our minister in the south, when you see how much work is being done on roads and putting new concrete roads in new areas, I agree they are needed and it helps with the infrastructure. I don't think the infrastructure methodology and emphasis have changed. I think the issue of him taking over infrastructure and Minister Williams with MIT, I am hoping that they could deal with the capacity issue we have when it comes to projects and the PSIP program. We have the Molyneux project, you have the cultural center, you have other things coming that the Prime Minister and his government have articulated on the PSIP side. And the issue has to be capacity. Do we have the equipment? Do we have the engineers? Do we have the labor force to implement these projects? Because they came in heavily critical of the last government, saying that they were losing funding because we weren't implementing fast enough. And I'm not certain that we have seen that pace pick up. And that is the issue, and you need to seriously look at it. We have a new statutory body that replaced PPU. The planning unit. And you're still seeing a preponderance of people putting up shacks and thing all over Grenada without no permission. It's almost like we are a lawless state. And with that, and the authority for that lies in this new statutory body that replaced the PPU. But you're seeing nothing happening. And they're endangering areas with traffic. And we had a guy selling on the roundabout on the top of the lane. And when the police remove him,
Chris,
is a preponderance of that. And you wonder if there is a political overtone to this. And you're hearing people say ministers giving them the permission to do all kind of nonsense. But we have to get that. I think the horse has already bolted the state. So we need to. I mean, and this is not a critique. And the Prime Minister giving up Ministry of Finance for infrastructure, I think signal that there is a need for some greater control and focus on how we do these things, because normally a Prime Minister doesn't give up Ministry of Finance.
No, I know it's just a short time. It's like 6 months, 7
Yes,
months.
Ministry of Finance is a lot of work. And I know my Prime Minister must have quite a number of things to deal with in his new tenure.
It also puts him is more visible.
And more open.
And more open
for things to happen.
The fact he's walking and touring. So I agree with you, Chris, that implementation and not limited to infrastructure also is going to be crucial, because again, going back to the World Bank last mission report, pointing out that this is an area that requires focus in terms
procurement.
of procurement, oversight. And oversight, essentially, we use the word, but let's understand it. Oversight essentially means that if you have a project,
You're spending the money in the right place.
Spending the money in the right place, and what's the body responsible for ensuring that the policy as designed in the project is in fact used and managed. And some projects I know dealing with UN agencies like IFAD and the Caribbean Development Bank ensures, so you'll find like program like SIEP and BNTF, Basic Need Trust Fund, they have independent oversight committees with a chairman and a board that gives direction and monitors to ensure that the project is in fact implemented as designed. So I agree, a lot has to be done there. The training in procurement is a critical area.
Let me throw one on the table for you.
Yes.
In terms of the transformational agenda.
Yeah.
And it's technology.
Yeah.
And the use of technology within the public service.
Yeah.
And yes, we have made progress. You could pay your driver's license online. You could do a lot of that, and when you go to inspection, it's so much faster. The Inland Revenue Department gives you affordability to do a lot of your taxes now online. Excellent.
Yes.
But I wasn't trained before this government came in place. That's a fact. The issue is, Byron, how do we marry the technology to increase the efficiency of the public service? It is a real problematic issue from where I sit. I'll give you a simple example. Why up to this day? I was sitting in the Senate for almost 15 years. In that almost time, I spoke so much about getting the Gazette digitally to us.
Right.
The simple thing as a gadget, which businesses need to see what is happening, laws implemented and so on. In the printry, government printry, we do the whole Gazette on computer.
Yeah.
And then we go and do it physically to print it. And
So
I am at a loss to understand why this process cannot be digitized.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's because you're trying to save a few jobs.
Yeah.
Because the same fee you're charging me to send it to me in the private sector, I'll pay for it to come digitally.
Well, but Chris,
And it's less paper,
Chris-
less driving around.
exactly. Well, one of the policy statements of the government early, this government, the new government, is a paperless environment. Yes. So you can see when the ministers appear, there's no paper, there's a computer. Yeah. So that said, it's likely to happen, Chris.
Well, I don't know, because
Your dreams come true.
It took us probably about 10 years to get those computers in Parliament.
Yeah,
And even,
but they didn't want it.
And even when it
was like-
came,
yeah.
there was a concern that the rules or standing orders did not allow for it and it had to be changed. But that being said, it's progressive. It has to start some way. And the hope is that we could get that to filter down into various areas that we need to get efficiencies.
Chris, health, critical, very important area. I mean, I just want to pick up some of the things the Prime Minister said about this. That there are HR challenges. They have challenges with people and workers there. They're exploring a new hospital site, but he made very clear that having a new hospital and still having the same HR issues, doesn't solve the problem.
Of course.
But most important, he talked about the National Health Insurance Scheme and mentioned specifically that he believes that this health insurance and is looking for continuity in terms of private health insurance and the public one. But he sees as 2 years, 24 months as a reasonable time when this could be launched. And he talked about encouraging investment from the private sector. And most important, which I thought is, we've had snippets of it before, but that collaboration with the diaspora support to a brigade of healthcare specialists, in the diaspora. So I thought there was some good points being made, but for the time being, Chris, from reports, I had a family recently in hospital, and the reports there are not good, in terms of whether it's from the emergency sector where they were and the timeline it took to get attendance and so on. It was let me say, just not good. But looking futuristic, though, based on what the Prime Minister says, there's some good promises there.
Mm-hmm. Health has never been an easy thing for any government.
Yeah.
And the attitude of our workers in the health system, I'm not talking about doctors and nurses here now.
Yeah.
Probably staff below that.
Yeah.
We know about the privilege issues that happen in the hospital and how to get that under control. But I want to touch on a few things. The new hospital and the HR staffing issues you recognize.
Yeah.
We have a new hospital that was given to us by the Chinese on the West Coast, just outside of Guelph.
Guelph, yes. Guelph.
Right.
Yeah.
We having difficulty equipping it and staffing it. And that's a relatively big facility.
It's beautiful. Looks good.
Right. So could you imagine going and build another new hospital, and we have issues with staffing and we have issues with equipping? I am not sold on that.
But the location is bad, Chris. It's in a bad place. There's no parking.
The general hospital?
There's no
Fine.
parking.
And that could be argued.
You have to move.
Yes,
Chris,
and that could be argued. So if you're telling me you're burning down what we have up there and putting a new place where we have parking and so on, and we staffing it and we have that, probably.
Yeah.
But the issue is we have to deal with those things before we get. The technology in medicine now is not about physical structures anymore. Mm-hmm. It's about telemedicine. Yeah. There is so much that we can't offer here in terms of specialists, but telemedicine fills that gap.
Yes.
So if I want a consultation with an oncologist somewhere in the US, and we could facilitate that through arrangements, I get the same professional advice from an oncologist here that I don't have here. Yeah. And the use of telemedicine and how we use that is something that we have to explore for small countries like us. Yeah. We can't run dialysis at the level that it needs to be run, right? Because for dialysis patients, you need so much specialists in case there's heart issues and other issues whilst under dialysis. You need a neurosurgeon, you need a lot of things. We don't have it, but you could get it through a telemedicine operation. And that is, when we do scans here, whether it's a CT scan, whether it's a X-ray, and we can specialize things, we send it to doctors and specialists in India who reads it for us and give us professional advice on what they've seen and not seen. You understand? So a doctor here don't have to...
Chris, I was just told that's all the time we have. But another point too is the point of sale service. The hospital, to what extent is providing that point?
I was about to mention the issue of triage and what happens in the emergency section. So if you come in with your head, get chopped on your thing, and you sit down there, your heart palpitating, they're giving that person priority over you, and you may stay there 3 hours. And we complain about the service.
Chris, this hour went so fast, We have to end here,
and I would say the last thing on health, I support the National Health Insurance, but there's a lot to be worked out there.
Worked out on it, yes. Beautiful. Viewers, thank you very much. This is all the time we have. We clearly ran out of time. I want to thank the technical team, and we'll see you next week. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Concerned about your general health